setup part of Hibernate. Okay, how we can set up the things and all, right? Basically, okay, fine then. So today we're going to see the setup part, the important part again in Hibernate setup. And again, as said before, right? This Hibernate is something which is completely, which deals with something which is database, right? Now, as so let me start first with Hibernate binary. So in order to download the Hibernate, right? So we have something called Hibernate org.downloads. So this is a URL which is the official site of Hibernate site, which we have, right? Now in this, I'm in downloads page now here. So where if you are in home, you can go to downloads, right? Downloads page. So in downloads page, you have a release bundle here, right? So in this release bundle, you can actually go for direct clicking on this. It will take you to the actual all the releases which we have in Hibernate. Now the direct download will actually give you the latest one, but normally don't go with this download because with respect to the client requirement, right? So maybe if you actually are going to work with a client who is actually working on Hibernate, right? Then obviously you'll have to go with the version which your project is already using, right? So that is something which is very important, right? Now here you can see there are so many binaries which we have in our Hibernate we have, right? So anyways, we'll be going with the latest one, which is 4.2.61, which is Hibernate 4 basically, right? And we'll be downloading this and we'll be working on this normally, right? So when you click on this 4.2.6 version, right? So it will take you to the download, and where you will have two different file things. One is a tar and one is a zip file. Okay, so you can go ahead and download the zip files you have. Now this will actually give you the complete setup of this version of Hibernate, which is Hibernate 4. Anyways, we are going to check some things on the latest Hibernate, which is the latest version going on is a Hibernate 4 version actually, right? So click on this, it will download your Hibernate. Now I have actually copied that over here. Now you can see that I've actually copied that binary and I've extracted that, right? Now this is a site where you'll have to go and download your files actually, fine. So I'll share this link with you guys so that you can actually go ahead and download. Don't worry about that. Now let's get into this binaries and see what exactly are there here which we have to use them. So here we have project and documentation. These two things are something in project. You'll have few conceptual examples of each and every concept of Hibernate. We have the same thing is there for even struts and springs. If you have seen, right, there'll be something like documentation and projects. Whatever binaries we have downloaded, right, there'll be both. You don't actually have to go to some forum and see. In these documents you can see everything will be there, right? How to start, what are the different manuals you have, right? Or else you already have something called here in your Hibernate itself. You will find something called community. We have user forums, right? You can go ahead, actually you can just sign up with this site, and you will get all kind of responses you want. The same is for even struts and string sites too, right? They'll give you the same type of community support on that, right? And if you want separate topics, you have a direct blogger, right? You can directly go and surf into the direct different topics we have in Hibernate, right? The main folder for development which we have is lib folder. Now this lib folder is the one which will give us all the jars which are needed for setting up of Hibernate, right? Now in this folder we are not going to anyways add all the jars. You can see there are subfolders we have, right? So we'll create whatever jars we need, right? We'll be adding that. So there are some optional, there are enwords, and there are something called required folders and all, right? So these are different folder structures which you'll find in different versions itself. If you download the third version, right, Hibernate release of third version, you won't get few things. So you will be getting something called, in place of OCHI, you'll find some other folder. Don't worry about that. As we are going to use a latest one, now this is a folder section which we are going to follow. Now let me show you how we can actually configure our Eclipse project with the Hibernate framework, right? The first step, let me go to the workbench. I've just created a new workspace. It's a brand new workspace which doesn't contain anything. It doesn't have any struts configuration or any springs for configuration or anything, right? I'm just configuring this with a brand new Hibernate itself, right? So yeah. Now, so let me go ahead and create a project here. New, let me create a Java project, and let me say it as my Hibernate sample something, and click on finish. Change it up. Okay, now adding up binaries is same as the binaries which we have seen already in our springs and struts, right? So here in our project, right, you will already have a jars which are normally will be there in your Hibernate projects, right? Now here what we are going to do is, so let's continue. So here I was talking about the libraries, right? So you have a default library which we have, and which we need to have this for the normal execution of the project, right? Now for setting up a Hibernate framework, right, again we'll be going with the same pattern which we used to go. Like, we'll just go to the project properties. I click on this project properties. Now, so that we are going to use the build path itself, which we have seen in our Springs example, right? We are going to add the jars directly to our build path, so that we can use the same library in across our different projects, right? So let's go to the libraries here. Now here I'll be adding a add library. Now instead of adding directly jars, if you add any jars directly, right, so that will stay only with this project, right? And maybe in this workspace, if you want if you want to use a Hibernate jars, same Hibernate jars across different projects, right, then it is always better to create a library. Now library is nothing but this is one library. You can see here by default Eclipse will create one library called JRE system library. This is like a folder in which there will be all the jars will be included, whatever are needed for our project running. Same way we are going to add a library. Click on add library here. So when we click on this, so here this is the one which we already have seen in Springs. Now here we are going to select user library, and we are going to create a user library in such a way that we can actually use this across different projects if you want. Let me click on next. Now here you can see basically, as it's a first time we are actually setting up in our workspace, right? Now which means this is the first time we are actually going to create our user library. Now that is the reason why in this particular workspace there are no user libraries we have. Now let me click on user libraries here, and let me click on new. Now here let me give name as some Hibernate. Now this is my user library name. Let's say you can give any name you want, right? And this is something which is user library, so you don't have to click on system library you want. Click on OK. Now this Hibernate, you can see the symbol. This is a user library or library we have. Now to this we are going to add the jars. So let me select add external jar here. Now you can see it latch. Now let me take you to the folder which I have extracted. Now I have extracted something called Hibernate release 4.2.6 final, right? So in this, the first jar which we are going to add is, let's go to lib folder here, right? So in this lib folder we have something called required. Now in required folder, this is the library which is very important. All the jars you have to add in your project, so that it will actually add up all the jars, where you can see that one very important jar is something but Hibernate core. This is the main jar. And if you are using Hibernate 3, right, now if you are using Hibernate 3, sometimes this Hibernate jar will be outside this folder. So in this mother folder itself you'll find the Hibernate jar. Okay, so or else if it is in 4th, If it is a Hibernate 4, then you'll get the same thing in your lib folder under required. But don't worry about that. Whatever jars are there in lib folder, add all. Right? So I'm going to select all.
Hello, Srinath.
Yeah, Ujjwala?
No, nothing. Just your voice was disconnecting a little bit. So I was just checking. It's fine now.
Okay, actually there is some power fluctuation going on actually. So that is the main reason. Okay, no worry. So here I'm going to select all the jars and click on open. Now you can see it will actually add up all the jars from the required folder, right? And let me go to Hibernate again, and we have to select some more jars. Let me click on external jar. Now let me get back to lib. Now here we have something called JPA. In the JPA you will find one jar which is entity manager. We'll get to know what exactly is entity manager when we start writing something called model classes, right? Sorry, in our model classes we are going to use the entity managers of Hibernate, and sometimes we are going to use entities of some other package too. We'll see this part when we actually go ahead and create a entity manager. Let me select this and click on open. So this will be added, entity manager, right? And so these two are done, and let me click on external jar and let me check if there are any other. Now you have required and JPA, so that will do. So these two things will actually do for our CGA. You don't need this. Okay, in fourth version I'm saying, as if you are using in real time, if you are using third version, then you'll have to add required, you have to add JPA, and then you'll get one more folder called some bytecode or binary something, right? You'll have to add even that jar, and you have to get into the mother folder. In this mother folder you'll get a jar called Hibernate jar, right? And that jar you have to add into your project. Fine. So as of now, for the fourth version, as they have integrated all the jars, right? Now you can your Hibernate framework setting up for your complete workspace is done. Here you can see all the jars will be added to your project. Now let me select this Hibernate, click on OK. Now let me select this, yeah, this checked, click on finish. Now you can see your Hibernate jars got okay. Now let me select this part and click on OK, and your Hibernate user library will get created, and all the jars will be automatically get exposed into your project now. So this is the complete setup of Hibernate jars which we normally do into our project, right? So once you are done with the Hibernate jar configuration, right? So immediately what we have to do is we have to do something called creation of configuration file again. Now as we have seen like XML files in our struts and strings, right? Even here you have something called XML file, but we normally call it as a Hibernate config file. Even the name will be same. So that will come up in your source folder. Let me click on this. New. You'll have to create a normal XML file. Click on other. Let me type in something called XML. You'll have to create a simple XML file. Click on next. And here you have to follow the name as same, which is Hibernate dot CFG, which is config.xml. Now this name you have to follow the same. And if you don't remember this name, right, don't worry, just go to the binaries again here, which you have downloaded, right? Now in this binaries you have something called project. Right? You have so many projects which configured, right? So in this you can search for any XML. You can see here as a search. Now this is a name which all my projects are actually taking up, right? Now you can copy any one of the config files so that there are no spelling mistakes and all. Go ahead and paste it out. Now this is the name which you'll have to keep always. Now once you keep this XML name the same always, as we have seen something in struts, right? Now you have to follow the struts.xml, and your struts.xml will be your startup XML, and from that XML you can actually go ahead with any number of XML things you want.
Hello, Srinath.
Right? Yeah.
Hello?
Ujjwala? Yes, Ujjwala?
Sorry to disturb, but I'm hearing a lot of noise from the side.
Lot of noise. No, I'm in my office room actually. So here, so let me select source here and go ahead with this XML and click on finish. Now try to maintain the same name because your Hibernate library will actually search for this XML, which is hibernate.config.xml, cfg.xml, and this is a file. This is the only file where we are going to map all the model classes, all the connection strings, everything in our complete Hibernate project. And again, I'm talking about only one project. If you are going to create one more project, right, even there you have to create your XML, whose name should be same, where we are going to give all the connection strings and everything over there. So if you remember in our previous classes, right, we used to give if it is a web application, right, you can always give your connection strings and all those things in your, let's say you're developing some servlet project, right, then you can give that in some servlet config or some servlet context, right, and if you're developing some JS piece, right, then you can give it on config or application context. Same way here, we are going to define them in our Hibernate XML, which is called as a hibernate.cfg.xml. Now this is the one which we have. Now in this XML, right, so few things like some configuration files, right, everything like connection string and all should be same, initial things. So once we are done with the connection classes and all, right, then you can actually map your model classes. The model classes will be same again. Now in order to get the default XML for connections and all, right, though you don't have to remember them again, you can go back to the binaries. Just in your project folder of your binary, search for your configurations, right, and you'll get some example configurations, right. Open up any one configuration, any configuration where you have something on, connecting them, you'll find the connection strings and all. Now you can see there are few things here. Now I have opened up one XML to actually show. Now this is XML which I have. Now this is my hibernate.config.xml which I have actually taken from one of the projects. Now why I have taken this is, so this contains everything which I have to explain you to configure your Hibernate configuration. Now, so let me just copy them all. I'm copying this and I'm going to paste it in my XML. Now this will actually give us a default, main items, main tags of Hibernate XML, where we have to mention few things like connections, right, your dialects, your SQL truths, right, and your recreations and everything. Now this contains everything. So you can use this XML as by default, right, and you will get this XML in one of your configurations files. Don't worry about that, right. Now, so let's go ahead and see what exactly are each and every block of this we have. Now the first one we have is basically it's an XML tag for startup tag or encoding. Now immediately, as we have seen something on doc type, right, we have already seen this doc type in our strings and structs too. Now this doc type will actually qualify our XML with the Hibernate which we are using, right. As of now you can see I have taken Hibernate configuration of 3.0, but don't worry, the same Hibernate configuration will also work for the 4.0 version 2, because all the tags which are pertaining to this versions will be populated here, right. Now the root configuration of Hibernate is Hibernate configuration. The root configuration of our strings is beans, if you remember, right, and root configuration of struts is struts. Same way here, root configuration of our Hibernate is nothing but a Hibernate configuration, in which we have to give everything in something called session factory. Session factory is something which will actually give us a scope, right, for basically to get the connections. Now here, if you see in our session factory, right, one connection to the database is nothing but one session, right, and if it disconnects and connects again, which means a separate session has been created with the database. Now how it is connecting, creating a connection class and everything, you don't have to worry. As we have already learned in JDBC that There you will have to touch each and every item, like connecting everything, creating of your data sets or result set, creation of your SQL SQL adapters, right? Everything you have to actually create there, or SQL commands, and then create a query now. But here things are different. You have to go ahead with your interaction with database, but with the properties which are providing, which are different connection things you are providing, your Hibernate will actually take up the details. Internally it will actually connect to the database and run the details whatever you want, and it will retrieve the details. That is what is going to happen here. Now in our session factory we have the first block called database connection settings. Now you can see here these are the same classes which we have already seen in our JDBC. Now you have to provide 4 very important parameters here. The first parameter, now everything you can see will come in a property mapping, right? Property tag. In property tag, the first name. Now this name is something which qualifies our Hibernate internal usage classes, right? Now the first one is connection.driver.class. Now here, the second thing what you have to know is, based on the database you are going to connect. Let's say if you are going to connect to Oracle database, right? Then you will have to download the Oracle database JDBC API, and that JDBC API you have to mention here, right? That is the first driver class you have to provide. Now, and the same driver we used to download in our JDBC tutorial too, right? If you're working with JDBC, right, what we used to do, we used to download your corresponding JDBC, and then we used to create. But here one thing which we don't have to do is creation of driver managers and all. You don't have to do. Hibernate will take care of everything. And the second thing is creation of URL. Now connection URL is nothing but you have to provide the database connection string. What is the location of connection string? Like you have something called normally. So what we have, we'll be having something called host name of a database, right? If you remember the pattern which you have already drawn for JDBC, for any database, right, which is mounted on any machine, right, it will have its own host, it will have its port, right, it will have its username and password for the current instance of database, right, and basically it will have something called what else we have? Yes, we can have host, which is an IP, you have port, yes, username and password. So these are the maximum things which you can have, right? The same things we are actually mapping here. You have to give the connection string you want here. And after that, you can give your connection, which is a database username and password. Now this will be a single configuration, and again, if you are using the same configuration file even in your web application, right, don't worry, as this is a XML file, XML files in Java or any technology are raw files. Whenever I say raw file, which means it doesn't need any compilation process. If you want to change anything, you can change at one place, and this will actually affect the complete project for this type of a connection you want. And one more thing is, if you have any change in database, right, let's say you're actually moving from one database like MySQL to Oracle, or Oracle to some DB2, IBM DB2, right? Then again you have to change at only one place here. Just change here the different driver and the connection string and username and password. This will affect for the complete project you have, right? So that is what is the first block called database connection settings. Now the second thing is the connection pool. Like this is something which is connection pooling things at once, how many connections you want to make, right? Again here this will actually make it as a synchronized connection, right? If one transaction of database connection is going on, right, so it won't create the second one until unless the complete transaction is done for that connection. So that is something which is a pool size here. Now this pool size is not a server size, right? So database pool connection size will be different. The traffic basically we are talking about, right? So databases can have a million connection traffic. It can accept any number of connections, right? But your application, which means for one user instance, you are actually locking to the pool size. Now this is where you can give the pool size, and With respect to this, Hibernate libraries will automatically follow them, because each and every thread connection will happen in a separate thread, which is a completely synchronized method. Right? Now, the next one is something which is very important. It is called as a dialect. Now, SQL dialect is something, so see, for different databases, right, the SQL queries, writing pattern may be different. But most of the time it will be same, but there will be so many different things which will be different in Oracle database, or it will be different in MySQL or Sybase or DB2 or any database you want, right? Now here, as I said, in our Hibernate, we are not going to write that queries, SQLs. We are going to write queries in some other format. What is that? We'll see. Don't worry about that. But whenever you are writing something on top of query, right, you have to mention to Hibernate what is the type of SQL dialect. SQL dialect is nothing but what is the type of SQL you are going to map with your model classes. So that you have to mention here. Now, in order to mention that one, right, if you go to library, let me show you this library, which is r.hibernate.dialect, and this is something called H2 dialect. This is one of the type of database we have. Now let us go to Hibernate here, and in this Hibernate, if you can see one thing here called your Hibernate core. This is a main jar. Now in your Hibernate core, you have something called org.hibernate.dialect, right? You have something called org.hibernate.dialect. So let me go to, yes, this one. Now this will have, you can see, this will have all the type of database classes. You can see you have DB2, you can see Derby, you have MySQL, right? You have H2 dialect, you have Integris database type. You can see you have Oracle database. You can see if you download the 4th Hibernate version, right? You can see it supports till Oracle 10G, right? And it supports from 9.9 to 10G. Now this is the support you have, right? And you can see MySQL, you can see SQL Server also, right? You can see Sybase, you can see Teradata, right? You can see Sybase, you can see SQL, all the things. For all the classes, these charts will be there. Now you can select any one of them. Let us say if you are using your, let's say Oracle 10G dialect, right? You have to give this name directly over here. That's it. So once you give this name, which means whatever model class you are writing in order to generate a query, right, everything will be converted based on the database you are giving, right? With this, two major things are handled. First thing is connection to the database and all the pooling stuff. Second thing is what is the type of query you want to convert whenever we write a model classes for that type of query. Now that one we are giving it as a dialect. Now based on this property dialect, right, Hibernate will actually save this parameter or the configuration, and whenever it is converting your model some objects into query, it will apply this form of your query. Now all those programming methods will be already written in these classes. You can see all the classes direct binaries are already there in our Hibernate dialect, right? So in this model, you don't have to worry about what type of query you are actually going to convert, because it will take care of everything. Now you can see here, even the query part, if you are actually using JDBC, right, now you may be writing queries in different classes, right? It may happen that you have to write classes in different you have to write queries, you have to write queries in different areas, but here you don't have to worry about it. Now you will be writing object format of queries. Now whenever there is a database change or anything, right, your database table structure may not change. So at that time, if you just change the database type here at one place, right, so all the object models of queries will run as is. That is one more very big advantage you have using your Hibernate. Now the same thing we have already discussed in our JDBC too, right? In JDBC, wherever you want to run a query, there you can, some people write query there, but this will actually reduce a redundancy of change, right? So that's a one more main advantage of Hibernate. And then you have something called cache, second level cache and first level cache you have. So as of now, just we are just keeping as no cache provider. Don't worry about this, we'll come back to this. And this one is show SQL. So whenever we run this program, right, whatever SQL it gets created based on the object model we are creating, right? So that SQL will be printed on our console, right? Okay, if it is a web application, it will print on console, or if your web application is deployed on Tomcat, it will show the output on Tomcat console. Okay, so basically normally what we do is we normally keep false in our real time. Real time in the sense during development we'll keep it true, right? But during production, so when you actually deploy your product into client place, right, then you should make it false, because unnecessary, if you are actually creating complex queries, right, it will take some time to print on console and then move it to the other things, right? So that is something which we are going to take up on more things. But during development, yes, you have to make it true, right? And sometimes in some project, what happens is your configuration main stuffs, right? These stuffs will be taken care by one a single point of contact sometimes. So before going to production live of client place, now we'll have to take care of these things, right? And this the hold of this configuration file, I mean basically this part, not the mapping part. So mapping part anyways will come to this, because this is something which we are going to work on as Springs, as we are going to give all the classes and everything here actually, and we'll come to this later. Now these are something which it will affect the whole project as such, right? That's why this will be actually holded by one or two people who are actually taking care of actual deployments of your project, or this will be taken care by the release people who are actually taking care of the release builds, who are actually building up the taking up the code, taking the build cuts and deploying, right? They may take care of this because they can change once and then deploy, so that the whole project will work according to the properties you are giving. Now this is something, this is how we normally configure our Hibernate Setup, right? So with this, what happens is our project is under Hibernate configuration, Hibernate framework configuration, and this configuration file. With this configuration file, we know that okay, what is the type of database we are going to connect, and what is JDBC you have. And again, one more thing here. Now, in the same project, you have to actually download your JDBC API, and then you have to add it to the external jar you have. Now, normally, if based on you have application, right, your JDB, you can actually find your JDBC. Let's say it's an Oracle. Let's say you want Oracle JDBC jar, right? So you can go ahead, you can get it from direct official site of Oracle, right? So for which database, again, right? As I said, for each and every database, you'll be finding your different jar files, right? So based on that, yeah, you can see JDBC, right? Based on which database you are going to connect, right? You can download that. Let's say if you are going to download this one, right? You can see you can actually use this from JDK 1.5 or only in this JDK. You have to follow this one. Download it, right? And then copy the same jar into your Hibernate project, or again just right click, go to properties, and always try to add in your libraries, so that whenever you add it to libraries, so this jar will be used for across different projects you have. That JDBC API which you are using, you have to mention here, which is called as a class of that JDBC. You will find that in your documentations of your JDBC, right? Different releases you have in your JDBC driver side, you can find them out, right? So for every database type, you will find your JDBC, and most of the times, right, whenever you want to download, you will be downloading the 4 type of JDBC. If you remember the types of JDBCs drivers which we have already discussed in JDBC, right? The 4 type is the one which is most optimized one for web development and for your desktop-based application development, right? And people normally, Oracle, sometimes whatever jars you can see are 4 type of jars, the type 4 jars. so you don't have to worry on that, right? Which will be optimized, and you can actually use this for your database connections, right? Now this is how we normally do something called configuration of your Hibernate to this project. Now the same thing will be applied even for your web applications too, right? But normally what do we do is we normally create a separate API for Hibernate, right? Hibernate a separate maybe web service, or right, because a web application, if you're actually developing for a bigger client or a huge project, right, you don't create a Hibernate directly in your web application. You create a separate web service client. Now that web service client will be again your a simple web project where you're going to create all your XMLs, everything, and that is a point where your web service will be actually will communicate to your web application, and then the communication will happen. Now that is the reason why I have taken this type of project, so that you can see it much better, right? So this is how we normally do something called configuration of Hibernate in our Eclipse for the project.